Thank you all for being with me and with us today at this afternoon after that long time of waiting to be with each other. Okay? Hello, good afternoon for you all. I am Dr. Amal Amin, Associate Professor at National Research Center Egypt, founder and chair of Women in Science Without Borders Initiative, WISPO. It's my great pleasure to have you all here and welcome you all for our fourth multidisciplinary international webinar of the series Saturday Science Webinar. But today is Friday, unfortunately, with the theme of challenges facing humanity at the age of COVID-19 and beyond. Unfortunately, last Saturday webinar was cancelled because of technical problems where we rescheduled today the same meeting. So sorry for inconvenience and welcome you here all. Sorry and thanks for being with you today. The webinar is international and organized by Women in Science Without Borders Initiative, which was founded in 2017 as Global Forum for Males and Females distributed in 60 countries with a slogan of Science for Sustainable Development to serve society with science, connect people worldwide with science, make science available for all, and facilitate multidisciplinary cooperation across borders. We will have live streaming on Facebook on Women in Science Without Borders initiative page and our YouTube channel. If you have questions, you may leave it in queue and I part in a comment. Today, it's of my great pleasure and honor to host four distinguished speakers, where their talks will be in the following order. Professor Yin Li from China, Professor Camila Imfanga from Brazil, Dr. Ahmed Salman from Egypt and UK both, Professor Dr. Sonali from South Africa. First, I will give each speaker the chance to give short talk for 15 to 20 minutes. And after short introduction from myself, then we will start answering questions and discussions which will be moderated by Professor Sonali Das at the end. At first, it's my great pleasure to introduce the first speaker, Professor Dr. Yin Li. Professor Li is a professor at Chinese Academy of Sciences and former Director General of Bureau of International Cooperation in Chinese Academy of Sciences in China. His lecture will be on the development of science, technology, innovation in China. Small biography on Professor Li that he is professor and principal investigator in the Institute of Microbiology, Chinese Academy of Sciences. He is working in the fields of metabolic engineering and synthetic biology. He has more than 140 publications in Science, Nature, Communication, PNAS, etc. With an H index of 40, he is a founding chair of TOAS Young Affiliate Network Taiwan and served as a Director General of Bureau of International Cooperation in Chinese Academy of Sciences and Deputy Director General of Tianjin Institute of Industrial Biotechnology, CS. You may start, Professor Li, for 15 to 20 minutes.
Thank you, Professor Ma. So let me share my screen with you.
Okay.
So first of all, I'd like to thank Amar for your kind invitation and several months ago for inviting me to this very interesting Saturday seminar. Should be Saturday seminar, but was postponed a few times due to different reasons. You also give me a very challenging topic, talking to a very big picture on the development of science, technology, and innovation in China, which I try to address that question in 15 minutes in my capacity of serving as the Bureau of International Cooperation Director in the last few years. But this is a really very big topic. I try to using a few slides to give you a glance on this topic. So we all know that the China social economic development have progressed very rapidly over the last 40 years. since 1978, where we studied the reform and the open up. So in 2019, actually, the China's GDP already reached about 14 trillion US dollars, ranking the second in the world. And where the science, technology, and innovation contributed significantly to this economic growth, which by this year, by the end of this year, it's already about 60% of the new economic growth attributed to the STI. Well, we also see the very rapid growth of several interesting new emerging things. For instance, the high-speed railway tram and the shared bicycle and the online banking and also the code payments, which have become new normal in the China daily life, which we are also enjoying for that. But these are actually driven by the large STI behind the economic growth. Well, the driven STI development is also because the R&D investments in scientific research also increased significantly. Just talking about in the recent 20 years, so in 2002, the R&D per GDP was only 1.2%, but now by the end of last year, it reached about 2.2%. So given the fact that the overall GDP in China increased dramatically, so we could imagine that the amounts they put into R&D in the whole society is actually also increasing significantly. It is actually expecting the R&D on the percentage of the GDP could reach 2.5% around 2020, but this year is already 2020, so we are a little bit behind the projected target, but 2.2% is already a really significant number for showing the commitment of the government and also the enterprises and also the society to developing the R&D in different sectors. We also see that China has become a world factory because we have all kinds of industrial value chain covering from the iron production, the consumption, etc. So here on the left side, you can see the major industrial sectors. China plays very important role in global markets for that. These are also driven by the R&D inputs, so we could develop world-class manufacture lines in different sectors. You could also see that in recent years, there are for instance, the internet company like Alibaba and Baidu and also Tencent, these three giant companies are working very in the front line together with Google, for instance, in the US, and also Huawei as the mobile phone and also the 5G pioneer is also working globally. So those are particularly like Huawei is driven by intensive R&D inputs. So industrial technology innovation is going significantly in recent years, particularly in the recent 20 years. So some core technology also developing very rapidly. You may also hear recently a few news. For instance, in space science, our Chang'e 5 probe already left the moon with 2 kilogram the moon ground samples. It's on its way back to the Earth. We are expecting to receive the Chang'e 5 probe in a few days if everything runs smoothly. For the global positioning, the Beidou, this is China's global position, has launched all the satellites and has already putting its own navigation network, which is already providing service to many countries. And for the supercomputing, we already ahead of many countries. Today, we just heard a very good news from the University of Science and Technology of China, which is one of the university held by the Chinese Academy of Sciences, that they have reached a prototype of the quantum computing, which they could realize about 200 seconds, which for the supercomputing would need about 6 billion years to complete the computing task. And a few days ago, you may also hear that the submarine, the ROV, and deep sea already go to Marijuana Trench. I think it's underneath water, about 10,000 meters, with men operating 3 men actually operating that vehicle underneath. This is breaking also the world record. So those core technologies developed by Chinese scientists play a very important role in supporting those space and the deep sea missions. I talked about the quantum computing. Another area China developed very fast is the quantum communication. This quantum communication is actually starting in 2006 by a prominent scientist called Professor Jian Weipan from the University of Science and Technology of China. They actually started from 100-kilometer quantum communication in 2006, and later they built up the world's first quantum telephone network, and they also launched a quantum satellite missions in 2016. With the help assistance of these quantum satellites, they are able to build up. Actually, we did an intercontinental quantum communication between Beijing and Vienna in Austria. That was a world first in 2017. And in the same year, we also built up a quantum communication trunk line about 1,000 kilometers between Beijing and Shanghai. But now this distance has been already expanded to 2,000 kilometers with the assistance of other satellites. So this quantum science and quantum computing and also the quantum sensing is becoming quite important achievement in the overall quantum science technology in the recent 10 years. This is also a very prominent achievements. This is looks like a port, but this port has a 500-meter diameter in its diameter, which is really huge. It is a 500-meter aperture spherical telescope, which is a radio telescope. So it could help us to detect the pulsars, which is hardly developed in the universe. So we also hear recently there's another 300-meter diameter. This aperture spherical telescope is getting broken in, I think, in Puerto Rico, built up by U.S. scientists. But fast is running very well. It was built in 2016 and up running for up to 5 years, with very good function being operated. So we also call this fast is an eye for the universe. This is just one of the examples of the many mega science facilities that built up by Chinese Academy of Sciences and other universities over the last 10 years in China, showing also using these large science facilities, we could see the universe, we could find out things that we were not able to detect using the previous approaches. So we are talking about COVID-19. So the COVID-19 is really getting a challenging project, a challenging situation, where we also see many types of vaccines are developed by various countries over the last year. I think there are about 12 vaccines. Well, 5 of the 12 vaccines come from China. They're from different type. They have inactive vaccines, the RNA vaccines, and different type. We are also conducting the clinics, the phase 3 clinical trials in various countries. But the vaccine developed by US, by UK, by Russia, and also developing, and India, I think, is also doing very well. We hope those vaccines could go into effect in the very recent months, which could help us to prevent being infected by COVID-19. But most importantly, in China, we're not only relying on COVID-19, on the vaccines, social distancing, mask, and also the rapid detection of the infection are also very important and crucial for that. We're also very happy that there are very few new infected cases within China. That's also because of the stringent border control policies. And many foreign scientists are returning to China, even though there's a quarantine measure being taken. So we hope by international collaboration, this COVID-19 can be conquered in a foreseeable future. So I just listed a few examples. This is just a very few examples of the recent R&D achievements that are achieved by Chinese Academy of Sciences and the Chinese communities. So I want to give you why China could make such an achievement. This is because we have a national strategy. So Chinese government always attaches great importance to development of the science, technology, innovation since very early. Yeah, actually, back to 1956, we have a long-term development goal for developing STI. And if we're only talking about the recent 40 years, in 1978, the government leader authority, they claim the science technology is the first productivity for China to develop economy. So this is a very important conclusion. So since that, we have also, back to 25 years ago, we have the strategy of revitalizing the nation through the science, technology, and education. So this is also an important milestone. So 20 years ago, we have launched the strategy of invigorating China through talent. So talent which studied abroad are coming back to China, serving for the country and contributing their knowledge, their wisdom, and their creativity. And in 2006, so the country issued what we call the National Medium and Long-Term Science Technology Development Plan, which is 2006 to 2020. So we are about to the finish of this first medium and long-term plan, which lasts for 15 years. We are now at a stage of making our next 15 years plan, which is from 2020 to 2035. So for the next 25 years, what we are going to do from the nation, from different sectors, these are being planned. You may also hear that China will set up its plan for every 5 years. So we have completed our 13th 5-year plan, and we are in the process of launching the 14th 5 years plan. But these are overlapping. So we have 5-year plan. We could also have a 15-year plan, which could give you a long-term strategic view for that. And in 2016, we also have a National Congress on Science, Technology, and Innovation. This is for the first time, the nation put STI as a national congress. So showing the further commitment of developing STI as a driving force for putting the future development. So I list this factor to illustrate that the Chinese government from the top leader and not only this today's top leader, but the few previous top leader always think this STI is the core for the future of China. So if the government leader has such a commitment, it's reasonable that the whole nation and from different sectors are also attach great importance to STI. This is, I think, it's very important because I know for some countries, sometimes it's very difficult to convince the national leaders to spend money to drive the STI and education. So the Chinese Academy of Sciences is one of the very important driving forces for driving the STI in China, because we were just founded 1 month later for the people after the People's Republic of China in November 1949. So now the Chinese Academy of Sciences has become a giant institute. So we have 70,000 researchers covering all the major disciplines: physics, chemistry, information technology, mathematics, life science, earth science, and interdisciplinary science, and also the medical science as well. So we have 105 institutes, also 4 universities under the umbrella of Chinese Academy of Sciences, including the one I mentioned, the University of Chinese Academy of Sciences. And we also have built up 10 overseas centers in Africa, in Asia, in South America, together with the local institutions in collaboration. So the Chinese Academy of Sciences has topped the Nature Index for 8 consecutive years, together with the other world-renowned institutions like the CNRS in France, the Max Planck Society in Germany, and like Cambridge, like Oxford, and the Stanford University in the US, etc. I also want to mention that the Chinese Academy of Science is an important driving force, but it's not the only driving force. In China, the enterprises, particularly those innovative enterprises, have become main players of technology innovation. Just some figures. We mentioned that about 2.2% of the GDP of China is spent on R&D, but actually 78% of this total R&D investment is coming from enterprises, not only from the government. So enterprises contributed significantly to the 2.2% GDP. And now we have more than 300 out of 2,500 world largest R&D investment companies that's in China. And of that, those companies, in the recent 10 years, China has 62 unicorn company, which means they are estimated has at least 1 billion US dollar of their market value being born in different sectors. But majority is from the information technology and also from the artificial intelligence, which really develops very rapidly, a few in the life science sectors. And not only those enterprises, particularly innovation-driven enterprises, the local governments, apart from the central government, also spend significantly money of their income into STI. China has more than 30 provinces, but there are 6 provinces in general very rich. For instance, the Beijing, Shanghai, which is a municipality city, and also the Guangdong and also Jiangsu, those provinces which next to the sea, which highly developed region, they are committed to using STI as the driving force. So each provinces and municipalities, they have already each spent $15 billion R&D investment each year for that. I mentioned about STI and education is a national strategy, and how important is the education, because education, you could see, it represents 4.2% of the GDP, even higher than the R&D input. So this actually covers from the primary education, the secondary education, and the high level education, and also including the graduate education. And this is actually also written in the law that the 4.2% of GDP should be guaranteed for the education. So very importantly, each year now China has 60,000 PhD doctor being granted. Now we have, I think, world most college students. Now we totally have 38 million college students working in China in over 2,500 universities. But certain university has some as very good, and Tsinghua University, Beijing University, but others are also developing. So these actually put a very important talent pool together with the overseas comeback talents to be a really talent driving the growth of the R&D and STI. So with those education and STI improvements, China also now with reached about 1.4 million invention, the patent invention annually, and this is domestic patents, but also with the growth of the domestic patents, the application in international patents also increase naturally. And also the intellectual property protection has been written in the law, and the situation which was criticized many by foreign companies are also significantly improved in recent 10 years. So which we know for intellectual property protection is the core for protecting the international investment and to protect our innovation-driven company to grow sustainably. I mentioned a bit on the education, but now we are talking about overall, there are 5 million R&D workforce working in China. This is the high caliber talents working in different sectors, and they are really the key driving force for those achievements that we have made. China also sees international cooperation and science technology exchange are crucial and vital, because we have learned many from our peers abroad over the last 4 years. Now China, from the government point of view, has established the exchange and cooperation with more than 150 countries and regions in the world. Each year, several hundred thousand Chinese scientists and scholars will go abroad for academic exchange, several hundred thousand. And also the scientific publications through international cooperation, over 100,000. This is just estimates. There could be more, but ranking the third in terms of the publications through international cooperation in the world. And also the Chinese Academy of Sciences plays a very important role in these regards. A few years ago, China has defined its 5 development philosophies, so 5 key words. So you will see the first word is innovation. So innovation is the driving force to lead development. So innovation is always in the top place the prioritized. And coordination is very important, and green development. So you see Chinese government is really keen for cutting the CO2 emission and to protect green growth of the industry and openness. So although we are encountering some difficulties in encountering COVID-19, but keep open, keep collaboration with international peers is very important, and also the sharing. The shared economy, not only from the shared bicycle, but also from the shared cars, are becoming very, very popular in recent years in China. So these five keywords, five philosophies will sustain China's future growth, not only in the economy, but also in every aspect in the society. So I want just to summarize. I hope you get some information from these slides, that innovation is the primary engine of development in China. And this has been a common sense from the national leaders and from the scientists, from the entrepreneurs, and from also government officials, and also from the students, even in the primary school. And national mid and long-term strategy is really important because this could sustain a stable investment from the central government, and high caliber talents are the key, and continuous investment. Because of the strategy, you could expect your research can carry out for 10 or 15 or even 20 years without interruption. And international collaboration at any time to learn from our peers is a key for that. So with this, I want to close this talk, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Lee, for this interesting, informative talk. I really admire this big development of China, especially from 2002 to 2020. From your graphs, 1 minute. From your graphs, I really admired the development in China, especially from 2002 to 2020. And really, I admire also your philosophy that you have 5 items of development: that innovation, coordination, green, openness, and sharing. Nice philosophy. You collect all partners, all items together in one philosophy, and that's why you really increase the profile of science in China from 1978 or 1976, the first conference or the first gathering of science and technology in China, to 2020. I think China is the only country which faced the COVID-19 efficiently till now, I think. Right or
Well,
not?
this is because the very stringent control and very cooperative understanding from all the public civilians. So we all support this. What we did just follow the textbook. We did not invent anything new. We just followed the textbook. We learned from
Yeah,
that. And we did that. We did what our teacher told us to do, and
yeah, yeah,
all the people understand these measures. This is our
yeah.
understanding.
Scientific recipe.
Yeah,
Scientific
yeah.
recipe, right?
So we follow
Okay.
science. Yeah.
Thanks a lot again for your talk. And please keep with us because you have
Yeah.
special questions from the others. And we will
Yeah.
transfer to the second talk. Thanks again.
Thank you.
The second talk, thanks a lot. The second speaker, it's my pleasure to introduce second speaker, Professor Camila Infenga from Brazil, who will speak on behalf of Parents in Science Movement, instead of Professor Dr. Fernanda, who had bad circumstances today. So I would like to thank both Dr. Fernanda and Dr. Camila. I will introduce Dr. Camila. Dr. Camila got BA in Economics and Politics from London Metropolitan University, MSc in International Management. She is a researcher of gender studies with an emphasis on the dynamics of motherhood in academic. in academic career. She is member of the Parents in Science movement and research collaborator at the University of Sao Paulo in the Public Policy Research Center. Her lecture will be on parenthood, science productivity, and COVID-19 pandemic. You may start, Dr. Kamila, for 15 to 20.
Great. Hello, everyone. First, I would like to thank Amal for the invitation. It's been a great pleasure to be able to take part in this event and to present our work. Let me just share my screen, just a second. Okay, can everyone see? Yes?
Yes, I can see you.
Great. Yes, please, sorry.
Go ahead, yes.
Okay. So when we are talking about the challenges facing humanity in the age of COVID-19, it's very much necessary to tackle women issues and feminist perspective on the whole problem. So as a member of Parenting Science group, it's my role to actually talk about the academic career of women, especially the ones that are mothers and fathers. So here I'm going to address the work that our group developed and that we prefer to call it like a movement. So the Parenting Science movement is a group formed by 19 researchers, comprised by 18 women and a man. Most recently, we organized the Ambassadors Program, which we were able to reach the whole states of the Federation. So we have 73 collaborators now. And this has brought a lot of capillarity and expansion to our movement. So we are able to assess and to understand local realities across Brazil. So as you can see by the pictures, most of them are parents, and they are all very active in their own academic community. So when we start the issue about motherhood in academia, a lot of other researchers or even people from outside the academia wonder why this is a topic as a whole, because why don't we talk about like issues in academia rather than gender issues? And then we are asked like things such as like, oh, she was barely hired and then got pregnant in no time, meaning she's like subconsciously trying to take advantage of the maternity benefits, or else like 6 months holidays, right? So people like depreciating the value of maternity leave and such policies, or for instance, there isn't such a thing as an impact of motherhood in the academic career. So we do see like a denial of the issue as a whole, or even the generational collision, meaning when we hear like older researchers, female researchers saying, I managed to do it all without any special assistance. Why can't you do the same? So this is really harmful for the whole advancement of the agenda when we see senior researchers, female researchers, that you would think that they would be like pro this type of agenda, but they kind of act against it. And then finally, when we see, sorry, just a second. Hello? Yes, it's just the presentation is not going forward for some reason.
Why the presentation wasn't going?
Oh yeah, now it is.
Yeah, now it's okay.
Okay. Or when you have this narrative of the meritocracy, then the neoliberal perspective saying it's only a matter of working harder, or even you must definitely separate your personal and academic lives apart, which for the ones that are parents know that it's very much difficult, especially in the reality of home office. So here I'm going to show a bit of like the dynamics of mothers in science, so you understand the impact throughout the process of the insertion and maintenance of women in academia. So initially she would be faced with a work and family conflict, which is two ways. So basically she feels as like a deficient or like a not good enough worker because she's always absent because of family issues. In a home, she's not a very present mother because she needs to work, she brings work home, and then she fails, she feels like she fails like both ways. Then, as I think everyone knows, especially the women, we are faced with a double burden as professionals and caregivers. So women are, and I'm going to show you later in the presentation, we are the main person in charge of care of children and elderly at home. So we have this massive portion of work that is not factored in academia or elsewhere, and it still takes up our time, taking our availability to develop science or to be available for academic work. In spite of that, we still assessed under equal merit criteria. So that makes for a great disadvantage for women that are literally like assessed in the same way as men, childless men or childless women, and then is where the impact starts taking like a body and then making being very perceptible for all the fellow academics. And of course, as a consequence, we have family gender issues impacting the scientific productivity, is where you see women like decreasing or having decelerations and pauses in her productivity. So you see after maternity, after motherhood, her speed is like pushed back by this impact observed. And of course, at the end, like when she's like reaching seniority, she's faced with a cumulative effect in the academic career. So she has this small delays throughout, like starting the formation in master's degrees, doctoral degrees, and then postdoc fellowships. And then at the end, she's much older, or sometimes she's not even able to reach the promotional positions in academia, and her seniority, when it comes much later than it does for men. So why does it happen? Why these dynamics are in such way? Because we are geared by male roles, the hegemonic male model of making science. So what is the actual hegemonic male model? It starts with the traditional gender and norms. They still prevail. So in these traditional norms, women are seen as the primary caregivers. So these ideologies push her to be more of like a carer, a mother, and like a housewife sometimes, rather than an academic or a professional. So this type of sometimes, or most of the time, subconscious notions put women not in the center of her professions. So what we see here, that this all very subtle dynamics make her like undermine the ambition for her to pursue a successful career, just like men do. Also, childbearing is expected to be postponed. So what does it mean? So during this formation years, so between master's degree and postdoctoral fellowships, women are not very, the idea of childbearing is not very welcome. So it's seen as something that pushing her back as like, it's a problem really for women to get pregnant during those years, which we know are the reproductive age of women, because she'll be in formation for a post-graduation between the age of like maybe 25 or even 30 until 40. So that is the age for her biologically to be good to have children. And then she's not very like, her needs are not very well accommodated within academia. So she is expected to wait until after tenure to have like a family planning. Another factor is the expectation of total time availability and devotion to work. So in the reality of home office, this is particularly critical because we speak over WhatsApp, we have lives, we are speaking from our homes. So you can work at any time. And then women sometimes, like they need to follow with the routines of children, and they're not available even outside of the routines. They are pushed to assist children like during the whole day. So she's not available as people without children. And I'll be very polemic and say she's not available as men, even when they are fathers, because what we have seen from reports and in our surveys is that even when the caring of children is shared between fathers and mothers, mothers are still much more in charge. They are still much more demanded to actually do this work than men. And finally, we have the phenomenon of maternal body. Maternal body is when the noticeable pregnancy causes bias in the academic environment, in the lab, in the academic group. So which means is when the woman is visually pregnant, she starts being perceived in a different way. So her intellectual and cognitive potential it goes to the background, and the foreground is the pregnancy. So she's the mother, she's fragile, she's someone with needs. She's no longer the successful researcher. She's no longer who she used to be. So the maternal body is the stigma that it starts putting women in a different place. And it is the start of her in the role, in the hat of a mother. So bringing a little bit of the perspective of women in science in Brazil. So this is just an illustration to show, actually to kind of question the meritocracy concept. So what's the matter? It's the same distance. So the distance is indeed the same. However, women are faced with many more obstacles throughout her trajectory as opposed to men. So here we have the Brazilian regular development of academic career. So you see in the first line is the undergrad portion. So here what I'm trying to show is the scissors effect, where you start here, women on the top. So they are a bigger portion of entries in the undergrad, whereas women and men are on the bottom. So that's why you see the scissors. And the women start like through the leaky pipe, they start like fading away. And then when they get here to the very bottom, their participation is much reduced. So you can see here on top in undergrad, women in Brazil are 57%. And then they started dropping out academia, and you see when they start doing scientific work, they are 55, masters, they are 52, doctorates, they are 50, and then when the leaders of research groups, they're 47, and when they become professors at university, they are only 46. When they are finally granted the biggest fellowship based on academic productivity, they only represent 36%. And the same reality, men in the same path started at 43% and ended up with 64%. So what do we conclude here? That, let me just move this thing back here. I don't know if you can see or if the pictures on the top, but basically data from 2018 show that the holders of this main research fellowship in Brazil, the male ones, they are between 50 and 55 years old, whereas women, they are aged between 55 and 59. So what does it show us? That women do get there. They will reach seniority, not all of them, a much smaller portion, but they get there later. They take many more years, and these years may be explained through the motherhood impact. So now I'm going to show you a survey that our movement has organized with data raised from the Brazilian academic community. So here we show, I'm going to show the impact of parenthood in the academic career. So when we asked for the scientists, who is in charge of childcare, which by the way, is a data that wasn't available before. So we tried to reach the research funding agencies fetching this information, and it was never available. So then we created it. And now parenting science has a very relevant significance for Brazilian discussion of gender inclusion due to this sort of data that we raised in a pioneer manner. So as a caregiver, we see that 50% of our respondents, when they are mothers, they are the only caregivers of their children. And you see that the portion's changing for 28% when both parents look after children full-time, on a full-time basis. And 16% are able to hire a babysitter, and 4% both parents, but for limited periods, not necessarily like a equal or a fair share of work. And 2% have other family members looking after their children. And what does it mean for the scientists' productivity rates? So here we are showing different areas of knowledge to prove that this is a transversal, a cross-cutting effect across all areas. So we have here from agrarian sciences to linguistics and arts. So you see that the middle line divides the birth of the children, and you see that women, they were roughly all increasing the productivity rates, and then from the point they became mothers, it starts to drop. And then it's when you need to look at it from the perspective of public policy, because if this is a phenomenon observed in all areas of knowledge, it does need to be mitigated. And now we are going to talk about like the impact during the COVID-19 area. So what's happening now? Who is being academically productive? So when you start looking around like in news and then all work developed around productivity versus pandemic period, we see that women has indeed been faced with like much stronger struggle to produce, to publish papers, to do academic work from home. And this decline,
Dr. Kamila, only 2 minutes, okay?
Okay, great. So this we have like headlines from a few newspapers and showing the Brazilian scenario is just like elsewhere. Our movement has published a letter in the Science magazine, and we're very proud of it, because a Science magazine has tackled out the agenda of gender inclusion, especially for academic mothers. Sorry, let me just go back. Our data raising projects that we developed during the academic period, just to actually prove and bring empiric evidence of what the impact women is showing, women is facing, has echoed what we have raised before the pandemics, but indeed showing a more critical scenario. So for the questions, are you able to work remotely? Graduate students, you can see 70% said no. However, only 30% said yes. And you can see, if you look at through the lenses of gender, women are more impacted than men. When you look at the racial perspective, you see the Black women has been more impacted than the Black women. And then when you finally look at the parenting effect, you see the mothers were the most impacted. Only 11% were able to work remotely against 30% of the overall answers. For the postdoctorate fellows, we had 18% were able to work remotely, women only 13%, mothers only 2%. And what you can see that the professors have the same reality. Only 11% were able to work remotely, women under 8%, and then mothers only 4%. And then looking at the perspective through the ability to submit papers, you can see that the mothers were most impacted in comparison to childless female researchers. And a very interesting nuance of this study is the children's age. So as you can see, the most impacted mothers are the ones with children under a year of age, and then followed by the ones with children between 1 and 6 years old. And people often ask us, like, how does the pandemic social isolation really impact the research productivity? So you can see that housework is pushing us back. Children care is taking sometimes 81% of our time, family care, and then the funny and then really polemic factor of homeschooling. How is it possible to carry homeschooling alongside home office when the work is really on the women rather than shared with men? And then finally, you see as a minor effect, the mental health. factor. So our recommendations, and now I'm heading to the end, are these recommendations, just to be clear, they are based on the on our talks, on our studies, and then they are very much reflecting the needs of women in Brazil. So we asked for extended deadlines and flexibilization of timelines. We asked for funding schemes directed to research mothers. So especially during the period of return from maternity leave, we do also ask for CV assessment in a different way. So to consider the extension of maternity leave in all the pauses that a mother may have. Also schedules in accordance to childcare time. So we do see a lot of lab meeting times like in the evenings. And then we know that it's not really aligned with the children's hours. Also the redistribution of workload upon return as well. So it's expected to the woman to be full power to work after maternity leave, and then she does need still to share responsibilities in order to go back on her feet exactly the way she was before. And finally, we do ask for empathy, because the realities are various. I speak from the perspective of a mother of 2 young children. So my oldest boy is under 3 years old, and I have a baby girl that was born just during the pandemic. She's actually today 4 months old. So this is my reality, is where the pain touches me. But we have many different realities. We have Black mothers, we have mothers with children with deficiencies. We have many more issues. That's why empathy is so much needed in our movement. And here I'm going to leave our contact information. I do hope you can follow up us in the social medias, in our website, and our YouTube channel. And just one tiny detail, I'm at the end. I'm going to show you our t-shirts that our movement has organized. So basically here has the name of my children, and then you can add the name of yours. It's obviously in Portuguese, but it's just a movement to show that our children should be included in our academic curriculum. So our CV should contemplate our reproductive work and the birth of our children. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Camila, and congratulations for your new child, the COVID-19 child. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting, touching movement, really, to help mothers in academia. Usually we say women in science, women in science, women in science. What about parents in science? Not only
Yes.
women in science, because usually we have the equation, work-life balance. What about to cooperate with each other to make it easier, the work-life balance? Also, I like your males rules figure. It's very interesting, but it's not a matter of males or females. It's a matter of cooperation. We have to cooperate with each other, because
Exactly.
yes, I am convinced that there is no separation. It's a matter of gender justice or gender inclusion. We have to cooperate with each other. And that's why I built as well Women in Science Without Borders, to work together, not to be women or men. We are all scientists. That's why we have several members from men as well as women. And I may say that I had a big support from men as women as well. But it's a matter of communication, Camila. We have to communicate with each other. Like your movement, my movement, and so on. If you connect together, we can make a difference.
Yes.
Okay?
Definitely.
Okay, we will leave questions to the end. Now we will transfer to the third speaker, Dr. Ahmed Salman. Thank you, Camila. The third speaker is Dr. Ahmed Salman. Dr. Ahmed Salman is a senior immunologist, vaccinologist, the Jenner Institute, University of Oxford, UK. His lecture will be on updates of COVID-19 vaccines and the lesson learned. Dr. Ahmed Salman is a senior immunologist, vaccinologist, working in Professor Adrian Hill's lab and the Jenner Institute. Since April 2020, Dr. Ahmed Salman became a part of the Jenner Institute research group working on SARS-CoV-2 vaccine. He worked in statins, Serum Institute in Copenhagen, Denmark, which is a major center for mycobacterial vaccine research. Dr. Salman got his PhD in clinical medicine in May 2015 from the University of Oxford. Dr. Salman's work is mainly to identify and assess new target antigens as vaccine candidates for infectious diseases caused by human and veterinary pathogens, including malaria, COVID-19. Using advanced immunology, vaccinology, molecular biology, genome editing, protein expression, and the vaccine manufacturing technology. You may go, ahead, Dr. Salman, for your lecture, 15 to 20 minutes. You may hold the new good news for us about the new vaccine, right or not?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Amal, for this amazing opportunity and invitation. And thank you so much for all the speakers and attendance, because I really like the talks. It's all important talks, and linking and highlighting very important topics during the pandemic. I will try not to make it very scientific, because I will try to just highlight what we learned from this experience, and how we can apply it to have a better response and to save lives and to improve health care systems in upcoming pandemics. Because I don't want to be negative, but although we have some positive news, but we have to be realistic. We have to learn from this experience because it might happen again. I'll share my slides. And thank you so much, Dr. Amal, for giving this amazing introduction about me. So I don't need to tell anything about myself. We're working mainly at the Jenner Institute at developing vaccines. And that was like my passion since I graduated, to work with the immune system, infectious disease, and to translate that to a real product as making vaccines. So we based in Oxford University. At the top left-hand side, this is the Jenner Institute, which is a very modern building, having all the cutting-edge technologies for research, but that's always linked in Oxford, which is an amazing city that I like, with the old historical, amazing old style as well. So it's a very nice mix between the history and the modern style. Vaccine research field, it started a long time ago actually, but was not understood fully till the end of the 18th century, when Edward Jenner, which is an English physician, started to have an observation. The females or the milkmaid who got infected with the cowpox, they don't develop any serious symptoms about the human smallpox. And then he linked that with having somehow a system in our body that can generate a memory that could protect us against infection and infectious diseases. If we manage to induce that system in an artificial way, in a safe way, then you can generate a vaccine or something that can protect you for future infection with the natural disease. I think till very recent time, people was not really interested too much about vaccines or about that type of research, because it's a bit complicated, a bit a long process of generating a vaccine or testing vaccines. And it needs lots of funding and lots of time to achieve that. But sadly, with the COVID-19 pandemic, although they were since 2000 till 2015, there were nearly 7 or 8 endemic or pandemic, nearly to be a pandemics, including like 3 flus, infection like swine flu, bird flu, and Zika virus, dengue, having a series of these diseases, including the MERS, SARS, and Ebola in 2014. But people will never take it that serious, that it could have a real pandemic that become affecting everything in our life, not just the health or the like mortality rate or just like the health-related issues. We had now, sadly, a pandemic, although 5 years ago there were lots of shouting, highlighting the importance of learning from these small pandemics and invest more in healthcare systems and basic scientific researches, because it could happen to have a real pandemic. And sadly, these days we're suffering from that. We have over 65 million infection, over 1.5 million death, and that's in less than a year of the pandemic. So we should learn then from this experience and from that very, very tough and hard lesson. And just to go by flashback to highlight a few important dates when this pandemic started by the end of last year in December, nearly a year ago now. And at the time, no one was taken serious, as always, with the infectious disease, as I just mentioned. But by early January, when things started to be serious in China and started to spread very, very fast in that region, in the Far East, then scientists started to focus on that, and of course with the help with the health organizations and funders and governments. And that's a very important thing to speed up this process. And then by sharing the genomic sequence about the early January, people started to work on that. And by March, then it's become very, very serious when the WHO announced COVID-19 is a worldwide pandemic. So since that time, lots of people started to look, what is viruses, what is vaccines, how we can deal with that. Of course, I would not like summarize everything on a vaccine way to solve this problem. There's lots of other ways to deal with that. And importantly, taking the safety measures and like social distancing and of course, improving and investing drug discoveries. But vaccine is very important as taking the safety measures, because it's worked with a very similar principle. It worked with the principle of protection better than treatment or disease. Because if you have an effective vaccine, that's definitely going to protect the people from getting the infections, or at least will minimize the effect of the serious symptoms in these people. So then, since that time, people started to know more about viruses. SARS-CoV-2 virus, very tiny creatures that caused big troubles. And I would not go too much through the science behind that or the virus itself, but it's very important to understand their structures and how they work and the mechanism, and invest in that type of research, because as you can see, it would affect every single aspect of our life if they manage to spread and cause an infection. Not just the health, it will affect the economy, the simple livelihood aspects, including our simple, basic social activities with our families, with our parents, with our grandparents, our work. Everything will be affected if we underestimate these pandemics. So to go back to the vaccines as one of the most important way to go out of this, vaccines are just artificially training our immune system, which is very, very important to deal with these kind of pandemics. And we have lots of variations between us in our immune response. But if we direct the system to the correct immunodominant or immune stimulating part of that virus or disease causing microbe, then you can minimize the effect of that viruses. This looks a bit complicated. I would not go through it at all, except just highlighting these type of cells, which is the T cells and the B cells, are the two targets for the artificial vaccines, because they are the only two components of our immune system that can generate memory. So if you train them in artificial way against a part or a good target of your virus or pathogen, then if they expose to it again in a natural way, they will respond to that very, very fast, very, very strong, to avoid having any serious symptoms or even the disease at all. So to make a vaccine, you need to really consider these factors. And in normal relaxing situation, you can take more time when you generate a vaccine, but you need to be carefully consider these regardless the time you will take to generate a vaccine. People asking these questions about this process of vaccine production should take years, how we are able to produce it in that short period. Now we have some experience with less than a year. There's lots of effective vaccine against COVID, which is a record. But you will never ignore any one of these measures when you generate a vaccine. First things, the safety. This is unnegotiable parameters in the vaccine because there's still the chance that lots of people will not get infected. So if you would like to inject people with a vaccine, you shouldn't put them under any risk since they have the chance not to be even infected, and should provide a long-lasting immunity or protection, and should induce both humoral and cell-mediated immunity, which is the just I highlighted in the previous slide, which is humoral, mainly by B cells, and cell-mediated by T cells, and shouldn't induce any severe effects, including hypersensitivity or autoimmunity. So you need to make sure it's safe and not causing any one of these serious side effects. And what is very important during pandemic, when you need not just millions of doses, you need billions of doses, is to consider to make that vaccine easy to produce, easy to store, and not expensive. So you can make it available for everyone globally. Vaccines recently, they had lots of attack from anti-vax people based on like false studies and losing of the awareness and the knowledge, which is enhancing the immediate engagements of scientists and governments and leaders to spread the knowledge and the awareness about these vaccines and how they are very, very important and crucial for lives, again, not just health or lives to avoid death, as example from the disease, but everything in our livelihood. I would just go through a couple of examples from this slide that I like so much is about the measles. Measles used to infect and cause death for nearly 1 million. This is just in the USA at 1941, but by 2010, by the help of vaccines, it's almost lower that to less than 169 cases per year. And that's, 63 cases per year. And this is less than the people who die from climbing Everest Mountain, as example. And having a vaccine against mumps that caused infection for more than 150,000 people in the 1968 by the vaccines that caused less than 70 people a year in 2011, which is less than the people die from falling out of bed. So just to give you that highlight, how vaccines can reduce the death and of course, save lots of our important parts of our life. This is a bit complicated process. It takes so much time, funding, paperwork, effort to achieve it. But we learned from this experience, it's possible to speed it dramatically by lots of collaboration between the decision makers, the funders, and the regulators and the scientists. So ideally, you have the microbe, you need to discover the genome and the antigen structure, and then design a vaccine, test it preclinically in mice or animals, manufacturing it for GMP production to be used in human, test, of course, that toxicity and get the paperwork with the regulators, and then start the clinical trials, which is 3 phases. You need to start with a small number in phase 1 to just assess the safety and the dosage, and that's nearly 100 people, and then you go for more than 1,000 people in phase 2, and that's nearly going to cost at least 20 to 50 million pounds. And then you need to go to phase 3, that need to be at least in 10 to 20,000 people, and that's at least going to cost you more than 100 million pounds. And then you go for the manufacturing, the licensing. If you achieve these parameters for your vaccine, safety and high efficacy and all the parameters we just mentioned earlier, so then you get it licensed. That in a standard situation takes 5 to 10 years, but lots of that time will be wasted in paperwork and looking for funding. People work in academia will understand that very well. When you try to start any one of these steps, you need to apply for funding, waiting a few months to get the grant, start the work, get the results, analyze it, publish it. That could take up to 1 or 2, 3 years based on where you would like to publish it. And based on that results, you need to look again for another deadline for a grant application, look for funding. Hopefully you get it, and then you start the next phase and so on. You would spend at least 80 to 90% out of your time just waiting, moving from one step to another. That's a huge waste of time. That can be fixed, and I think our current experience is a strong and useful experience. So I can see that in less than a year, more than 58 vaccines are in clinical trials. 13 of them reach phase 3, 7 of them are nearly licensed or get a limited license. There's different type of vaccines, different technologies based on understanding more and investing more in that fields. And we can see by now, lots of vaccines depend on, as example, viral vector or genetic materials or attenuated virus, or using just part, what we call it subunit vaccines, as using protein-based vaccines. All of them will induce the immune system in a different way, but we're all aiming for the same target: train the immune system, build a memory against a pathogen. These are examples of some vaccines that reach the clinical trials or nearly licensing stage. I would highlight 3 of them that already announced their protection level, including Moderna and Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, which both are based on messenger RNA coated with a lipid nanoparticle, and Oxford vaccine. So these 2 mRNA-based vaccines, they're inducing over 90% protection against the virus, and they are safe. Of course, the cost is a little bit tricky in both vaccines. They're slightly expensive, and they need special logistics for their transportation. They need just cold and certain infrastructure to make it possible to contribute. And that will put some limitation in using them in low income and developing countries. The other side's Oxford vaccine inducing between 60 to 90% protection, and try to consider the other factors in addition to the safety and the protection level by considering the easy to produce, easy to transport in just 2 to 8 degrees, which is fridge, which will make it easier to produce and distribute in low-income countries. To just summarize and to focus on the learning lessons, because if we don't learn from this pandemic, I would say then it would be very hard to speak again about how that's important to invest in these kind of research and basic sciences. So first important lesson, we really should invest more in basic research, science research, scientific researches in general, but infectious diseases and vaccines need to be prioritized, because that kind of research is very risky. As I mentioned, it's very, very expensive. So there's lots of, as example, companies or governments, they don't put that kind of investment because it takes time and it takes too much money. And there's also a high risk of failure at the end. So we should invest in that, because it's not affecting just the health, as I keep mentioning, it's affect everything in our livelihood and social life and even mental health and economy. Second important lesson to learn is improving the international preparations and alignments between regulators and vaccine developers. After Ebola, there were lots of people and scientists shouting about learning from that lesson, but there were no preparation to wait for another pandemic. But we should do that based on our current experience. Third thing is increasing the collaboration between industry and academia. And that would definitely speed up the process, because still academia can discover lots of things, but to apply it in a large scale, you need to involve industry. And very, very important is offering education, awareness, and public engagements with local leaders and with people to increase their awareness and enhance the public confidence and trust in vaccines. The next important lesson is increasing the measure for fair vaccine accessibility and affordability, and that's by improving the infrastructure and logistics in developing countries to encourage the governments to work in that and to guarantee the fair accessibility of vaccines and drugs in general, and very importantly, to arrange global scientific conferences and collaboration. These lessons was very important to consider them when Oxford were working their vaccines. I would just tell the dates when things started in Oxford, started vaccinating first person in the 23rd of April, started the work in the vaccines early January, and by now I can say Oxford has vaccines in addition to other people, and we expect more vaccines to come. But one of the key things that allowed this process to happen fast is having a model for pandemic X ready and having some infrastructures and regulators and paperwork in plan before this pandemic happened, and even having a vaccine platform ready. So that was a good applications for all that preparations to speed up things and to make it possible to hopefully control or eradicate the current infection or pandemic very soon. I would like to finish by thanking all of you and of course the organizers again, and I would be happy to take questions by the end of the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed, for this nice scientific and informative talk as well. I would congratulate you on your nice recommendations with respect to the lessons which must be highlighted, especially for developing countries, especially for raising the public awareness, because COVID-19 really showed that no public awareness, accidentally no public awareness really, especially in developing countries. And the people still don't convey, you understand, the people still with no masks, with no precautions against COVID-19, and still the same. They have the same lifestyle. So that it's nice recommendation and must be followed. And I wrote a letter to one famous publication about that. We have to raise public awareness, but it's a responsibility of scientists, right?
This is true. Yeah, this is true. It's a collaboration between scientists, public workers, governments. They all have to work together to achieve that goal.
But one personal question. You said that successful vaccines should be safe, effective, long-lasting, immunity-induce severe side effect, inexpensive, induce humoral, and so on. Do you see that the vaccines announced now will overcome the COVID-19, or we will get rid of COVID-19 during 2020, or we will need more 1 year? 2021 or 2022? What's the range, the time range?
Yeah, that's a very hard question to answer, but it should take time because there's now, I can say there's vaccines, but the other challenge now is to produce them and distribute them. And that will definitely take at least 6 months to a year based on how long it takes to manufacture vaccines. So we should, during that period, to stick strongly to the safety measurements.
Yeah, 6 months is okay. If 6 months is, it's okay. Because you know that now COVID-19 against travel, against transfer of scientists, against transfer of the people between countries, against the economy itself. That's why maybe all countries in the second wave of COVID-19 will not lock down, will not go to the lockdown.
Yeah, it's hard to go through that. It's very tough for mental health, for economy. So you have to try to live with the virus for now till we have the vaccines.
We live here with virus in Egypt, you know. Okay, yes. Thanks a lot, Dr. Ahmed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmed.
For questions at the end. And we will transfer to the fourth speaker, Dr. Sonali, Professor Sonali Das. It's my pleasure to welcome the fourth speaker, Professor Dr. Sonali Das. Her lecture will be about tackling challenges with solutions that can work. Professor Sonali is a statistician by training, University of Connecticut, USA, elected member of International Statistical Institute, chair of the second Women in Science Without Borders Conference, WISFOP, and a passionate STEM champion. She has extensive experience of working in a variety of transdisciplinary research areas and enjoys learning about human behavior and human choices. You may start, Professor Sonali, for 15 to 20 minutes.
Amal, very much first for, through your track record, you have made a lot of efforts in doing science, but also the diplomacy around science. And initiatives like this that actually are very, very important. As you get older, you realize how important it is to be able to engage with stakeholders of all kinds. So thank you very much. For those who have not heard of the University of Pretoria, it's in the capital city of South Africa. I work here. And this is our centenary year. So not the universities, but the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences. There were a lot of plans in January to make it a gala year for everybody, but unfortunately, we have very little to celebrate, but we have a template dedicated to the centenary year, which is what I will be using to sort of celebrate with you our 100 years. A few months back, I was asked by South African Science Academy to speak on a very specific topic. They asked me to talk about tackling challenges with solutions that work. Now, when I was giving this topic, I was a bit nervous because I'm a statistician. I know you may propose whatever you want to propose, but things may not work. There is a lot of uncertainty in everything in our lives. So I added that word can and asked them, I'm going to speak about some things from my experience, having grown as a researcher, and what I feel can help us. And I will not talk about statistics, but I will talk about a cross-cutting philosophical growth that I have felt working as a statistician in Africa. So I think it cut across any research that one does, real life research, to reflect back and ask ourselves, who are we? And who are we involves understanding where we belong, the ecosystem we represent and we flourish in. And within that ecosystem, how do we identify what are our challenges where I belong as a researcher? How to convey that problem, or the uniqueness of the problem, to the world at large, and how to convey potential solutions to the world at large. And as I said, I'm a female statistician working in Africa, and I think through the next few slides, you will get a flavor of why I highlighted those three words. They are not the most, what shall I say, secure words as a researcher working. So a few months back, we went on a family holiday in what we call in South Africa, the bush. So it's a bit of wilderness where you have some animals, some natural vegetation, and it's quiet. And I took this picture of a sunset and sent it to some of our friends. And a response I got from one of our friends was, oh, you don't have big trees in Africa. Now this friend is an educated friend. when I saw that on the WhatsApp message, I said, what idea does this individual have about Africa, that you see one picture in a few trees and you generalize that impression to a whole continent, which is extremely large? And then I think, is it just a problem of that individual's ignorance being outside of Africa? Is it problem of us in Africa not being able to tell the world who we are? Or both? Some of you may have seen this, but it's very important to see it again and again and again. Africa is a huge continent geographically. Traveling from Cape Town to Cairo can be an 8-hour flight, a direct flight. We are a huge expanse of land and consequentially a huge expanse of ecological, cultural diversity. And we must never forget this as researchers working in Africa. Okay. A few weeks back, I got an invitation to attend an international webinar as an audience, just like today. And a part of that email is here. It says 1st December, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. time zone GMT, then Amsterdam, Berlin, Bern, Rome, Stockholm, Vienna. And the first thing that occurs to me, this is a question of longitudes. Timelines go by longitudes. There is a vast span of land mass in that longitude. What then stops countries from putting in, say, Accra, Lagos, Johannesburg? I almost felt like that little child in school where the teacher always picks up their favorite students, and while I want to belong to that group, it's always them that are being picked up. I want to be part of that. I want to be seen. I want to be heard. I want to be recognized. And these are small, small issues on the surface of it, but they are not. Okay. So I wrote back to the lady that why didn't you put other time zones from Africa? And she responded back by saying, you are in the same time zone. So I responded back. I said, ma'am, I know which time zone I am in. My problem is not that. My problem is that you do not want to be reaching out explicitly, overtly to a whole range of community researchers who are in the similar time zone and make it more inclusive. Research is just not publishing a paper or sitting in a lab doing it. It is recognizing the democraticness of the process. Okay, and in case you didn't know, Africa has 6 time zones. So that is that other keyword that I put in working in Africa. The other challenge is obviously as a woman, and when up until a few years ago, I was quite oblivious to the role of gender in science, maybe because I have been fortunate not to be discriminated against for being a woman, or I was not smart enough to recognize it. But over the years, I have made it a point to hear, why is it being talked about? Why is it important? And the obvious objective answer is at least half of the world population and half of the population in any country is females. Whether they are in research or the consumers of the research, if you do not include their perspective, the solutions, the products that you're proposing or devising are missing out on that, if I put it very bluntly, the consumer base, the profit, the business space. You're missing out opportunity in terms of money, time. You are probably wasting a whole generation's opportunity to make that research or the product accessible. So every researcher must be vigilant that when you're defining a problem, are you sensitive? Are you aware that the product you're devising may have some influence among the female members of the community or the intended community? So that's the female part. I'm very glad that Camilla pointed out empathy. I teach quantitative methods in business management department, but I make sure that at least I spend at least an hour for online classes, or at least a day in an in-person class to talk about empathy in business. And we should talk about it all the time. If you do not have empathy, there's a big problem. Empathy makes you listen through the eyes of, or through the ears of, the person for whom your research is intended. You cannot sit in a bubble that is completely disjoined and propose solutions because you think that's the best. We are again then wasting valuable resources in terms of money, time, opportunity, and wasting and actually cheating half the population, intended population. Empathy is so crucial that I think every curriculum in every university at every year should spend some time to sensitize the notion of empathy in defining problem, in defining the context. The other option as the other thing, which is on the solution side, empathy gives you the context, the purpose with more clarity, and as it should be. Agility is something that's coming out as a very, very important and useful survival agenda in any research group or project. If you are agile, you are open to borrowing expertise from a field that may be very, very different from your own. I, as a statistician, have been trained in a certain way. I have not been trained in psychology. I have not been trained in biology. I have not been trained in engineering. But what if my solution to a water project requires, so I could get water data and do some fancy modeling, publish a paper? Is that what I want to do? Or must I then sit with a core team of experts who will critique me from, as an engineer, as a biologist, as a psychologist, as an urban planner, and making that a revision if required to make that product or process accessible to the right people with the best intended intentions. I think what I'm trying to say is it's a very philosophical way of looking at things, but that's what higher education and higher thinking must allow you to do. It is not just enough to do a PhD in, say, math, but in the context of where I operate, who I represent, where the solutions are going to be applied. It is very important to step back again and again to say, is this a research in isolation for a publication, or is it something more? So thank you very much. The holiday seasons are coming. Stay safe, wear mask. Thank you,
Thanks
Amal.
a lot, dear Sonali. Empathy and agility, nice philosophy. I don't know that you are a philosopher. I don't know personally. Okay, the floor with you.
Yes.
You can moderate the question
Yes.
and the discussion session. Okay.
Okay, from the audience, I have a very specific question for Prof. Lee.
Yeah.
Prof. Lee, the question is, so I'm quoting, could blockchains be a solution to overcome COVID crisis?
Oh, I'm not an expert on blockchain, so I could not comment on that. But I don't think that's a realistic solution, because as Amar commented, what we did in China was not something really fantastic.
Business management
And we
department.
just follow the science. So I don't think we need to use a so fancy blockchain to deal with the pandemic. We just need to do simple things. As you said, wearing masks as a starting step.
They think that you are the guy of every solution, because you said that you follow the textbook, so that you can have a solution for everything, even the blockchain.
Well, we follow the textbook because the textbook tells us social distancing, wearing mask is important.
Okay.
I don't
But
see
did you
any
follow the
questions
textbook
from
for the next pandemic? Okay.
I don't see any questions from the audience yet, but I'm keeping an eye on the chat box. Does any of the panel member have any questions for the other speakers? Okay, if not, I have a lot of questions. I think my first question to Camilla is, in your research, did you find, obviously there were people who had internet connectivity, good internet connectivity to be able to do what they did. But was the access to connectivity in any way different from male researchers versus female researchers?
I think that's really difficult to assess the internet connectivity. We can talk about different social economic backgrounds and different regions in Brazil where like the access of like internet is much more deficient and still incipient. But I think like between male and female, it's very much the domestic environment that they're impacted. And then of course,
I'm just thinking that if you have a certain amount of data available, would the male researcher in the house take the bigger share and the female not be able to do, because you have these daily caps on data or a weekly cap, and so I don't know how it works in Brazil. I'm just curious, but we'll wait to see that publication later.
Yes, yeah, we are working on it. We have already published a preprint as well as the letter on the Science magazine. But I think the main issue is really the availability, because a lot of our respondents, they are couples that both are researchers, and then they share their daily routine. So basically women work in the morning and the men looks after the children, and they switch. But the women are still like demanded. They don't have this like full like 4 hours in a row to work, and especially the homeschooling for children like in the school age, they have to actually be with the parents aside, and that's why it's much more difficult.
And now I have lots of questions from Prof. Salman.
Welcome.
And I'm sure some of the questions might seem very naive to you because I'm not a microbiologist or a biology person, but still they are concerns from a common citizen. When you say a vaccine, is it all the vaccines that are being developed, including the one at Oxford, is it just one shot or is it 2 shots? Is it a booster shot? So how long am I safe by taking the first injection?
Okay, now most of the vaccines that show their results, they need 2 doses. So you need to prime, and then 3 to 4 weeks later, you give a second booster. And how long it stays, that's also a hard question to answer. You need to wait to assess that by time. But I would say based on the vaccines that announced their results, who started in April or May their clinical trials, there should be a good immune response till now, because you cannot see how it will be in the future. So at least they give a protection for 6 months. This protection might stay at least for another 6 months based on the level of the protection now. So the antibodies will not wane or will not disappear in like a couple of days after if it's high today. But of course you have to wait after 1 year and you assess again, and then you see if they still have antibodies and good immune response, you can say immune response stay for a year. After 2 years, you can say it stays 2 years and so on. But you really don't need to have that long durability, or what we call it longevity, for your vaccines to cut or control the pandemic. If you have it for 1 year, you will definitely see a huge impact in the transmission of the disease and the number of cases. So most of the vaccines, they show that. They show at least 6 months to 1 year good response. And hopefully that will be longer. And based on that, you will see if you need a booster dose or not. Like if it's wane after 1 year, of course you will control the disease, but it might end up as a flu. You have to take 1 year vaccine every year.
My second question is, I've been reading in obviously newspapers, something called like if there's 70% of the population gets the vaccine, then it guarantees herd immunity. What must we understand from that?
Okay, now you need to reach herd immunity to control a pandemic. And there's 2 ways to do that. First way, by leaving people for natural infection to build their own immunity. And then the people who will pass that pandemic, they will have, this is mean they have good genetic structure that of course has an impact on their immune system. So then that by like kind of natural selection. So these people will pass that pandemic and they will, offsprings will have also a good immunity so they can overcome that disease. And that's what happened as example with Spanish flu. So sadly, there were lots of death, and that's way is very tough way. We don't want to take that way to leave people to be selected based on their natural immunity. And you will lose lots of the population. You'll have lots of death, lots of cases. But then with the Spanish flu as example, there were nearly 100 million deaths to reach that herd immunity. And then the people who pass it now, they have a good immunity. The other way, which is the safest way, and of course, what we want to take is through artificial immunity or vaccination. So you train the immune system, then you generate nearly 60 to 70% out of the whole population having a good immunity against a pathogen. And that will, of course, reduce the transmission and will put a control into a pandemic and, of course, might eradicate it eventually.
So I think my last question is a bit, it comprises, I think, 2 issues. Again, being in Africa, sitting in Africa, worried about Africa.
Yeah.
Obviously, the temperature at which the vaccine and different vaccines have given different recommendations at what temperature the vaccine must be transported, right?
Yeah.
Africa being, as we know, we are not very developed across. There's a lot of interior countries, interior regions. That is going to be an immense challenge. So there are 2 parts to it. What happens if the temperature is not as intended and the vaccine reaches the hospital and the doctors still pump it? Will that have a worse effect on say a very interior village in remote, say, Mali?
Okay, now I would start by saying I'm African. I'm from Egypt, so I completely understand all these issues. And apart also from that, my main research field is on malaria, which is mainly on Africa. So we always have all these like tough conditions when we do any clinical trials or when we want to do any field studies. So I completely understand that. And this is really one of the key things that when like Oxford vaccine, as example, they try to consider these issues. You want to make a vaccine for the world, not just for like a certain population that have the logistics or the infrastructure that make it easy for them to like get that vaccine. So there's some logistics with some vaccines, but there's more vaccines should come very soon and they publish their results. I mean, till now, we have 2 vaccines based on messenger RNA, and these are showing very good protection, but they have these problems with the logistics. And nearly 17% out of the world countries, which is the developed countries, they have these logistics and ability to get it distributed in these conditions, which is -70 or -40. But the good thing about Oxford vaccine, it's really overcome that. You only need a fridge from 2 to 8 degrees, and that's stable for 6 months. And that will be really like the vaccine for the wards. It's easy to produce, nearly 4 million doses next year, and easy to distribute. And it's also the cost, it's a factor. So 1 dose is nearly $3, and the 2 doses is nearly $6. Compared to other mRNA vaccines, the 1 dose is more than $20 to $50. So to get 2 doses, that's nearly $100 for the expensive one. So of course, there's other vaccines that will come. Hopefully they will be stable in temperature and easier to produce and to distribute to overcome that. The other point about if the vaccines distributed in not these ideal conditions, and of course, the impact of high temperature did something bad to the vaccine. I mean, if it's stay in like sterile condition, I would say it's not gonna cause negative impact, but it will not work. Why? Because when the temperature increase, it will degrade. It will degrade to simple amino acids, and if it's like based on protein or simple mRNA that cannot be translated to protein as Moderna or Pfizer vaccines. So then you need the whole structure of the protein to be presented to the immune system, and then the immune system take the action based on that. If it's degrade to small pieces of peptide, that's definitely will affect how to induce the immune system, but I don't think it's going to have a negative impact.
Yeah, I think we always say, no matter how good the research is, it's the last mile that is crucial for
exactly
the whole story to work the way intended.
Sure, and that should be under, of course, like help and support from like global communities, and there should be some recognized distributors for these vaccines in each country who will receive it, keep it in like ideal condition till basically distributed to like smaller centers to get it vaccinated.
My concern and fear is that because the developed countries will have access to the vaccines quicker, faster, in the right conditions. And in Africa, it will never be like that. So post the COVID era, would the socioeconomic divide not be even worse? Africa might be even worse off in the scenario, but I think it's just a concern, not a question.
This is true. I mean, it's a challenge. And this is why with the current pandemic, there's like an upper hand for the global organizations like WHO or Gavi or COVAX. So it's with the arrangement with the government, they not leave it for like private sectors or whatever. So of course there's some issues with that, but it needs to be really solved to avoid having this issue you worry about. But it's an issue and it exists. And we have to consider how to deal with that. But that's like a world organizations with governments to work on that.
Okay, Amal has just reminded we have 10 minutes and we will therefore take only 2 questions. One is in the chat and it's for Professor Lee. I'm not sure whether Professor Lee can see the chat or must I read it, but you can read it, it's for you.
What are the ways?
So what are the ways and means to sustain international collaborative research projects in the era of COVID-19 and beyond?
Well, that's a very important issue, and we have also discussed this issue within the Chinese Academy of Sciences with my colleagues at the Bureau of International Cooperation. So what I think you would agree with me that the traditional model for international collaboration have encountered great challenges because we could not meet in person. A meeting in person is very important because that will help us to develop the chemistry among the persons. So while we are adapting this new normal for using video conference, virtual conferences, so it's very important to develop what we call this is a new international collaboration infrastructure, because without a very good broadband system, without a very good the video conference system, it's difficult for us to communicate. Therefore, blocking the communication is blocking the idea exchange. So it is challenging, but what we will also notice, so the traveling is blocked. So meeting in person become challenging. So what else can flow? Well, we notice that information can flow. The ideas still can flow. What we are here today, so we listen to different presentations. So we listen to different ideas. This is still inspiring. So we know, for instance, we learned from Dr. Ahmed, the important development of vaccines in Oxford. We also know his comments on the future development. So this is actually becoming new normal. We are all adapted to that, but this is just the beginning. What we also notice that the data can flow. So you're sending a manuscript, you're sending a data collection to your colleagues, so you can still start in collaboration. The resources can flow. The resource meaning not only the biological resources, but the other kind of resources, which is a matter of subjects, which can be posted. So it can be posted to each other. This can still form a collaboration. And data can flow, resources can flow, and money can flow as well, because bank transfer can still going on. So you can still transfer money from one country to the other countries. So these are the things that we noticed that can flow, that can across the border. Although we are restricted as a person, we're restricted in our own countries. So we need to design the collaborative international collaboration based on the things that can still flow to each other freely: data, resources, and money, and ideas and wisdoms. So with this knowledge, I think we are actually, what we in China, we are trying to creating a new model for international collaboration that's based on the things that can flow. And we're hoping by developing useful vaccines in the foreseeable future, and the border of each country can still be reopened and to welcome in-person collaboration. So that's my understanding.
Nice.
Thank you,
That the
Prof.
idea
I'll
can
take the
flow.
last question. Amal, there's somebody who's put a question for me.
I have one comment
How
on
people suddenly
Professor
accepted
Lee.
e-commerce business model. So, so I'm going to give you a very high-level answer to the question that the audience is asking. There's a lot of factors depending on how new e-commerce is developing. It depends on where you are, which country, and within the same country, whether you're in a city or in a rural area, right? Some of the big companies were already flourishing. We have Takealot in South Africa. I was not actively buying from them, but post-COVID, I realized I can buy standard cleaning things or my standard household things without going to the shop and exposing myself. I started doing e-shopping then. But at the same time, I'm aware that people in the rural areas for whom even a cell phone is an alien concept still in South Africa, they will have to go to the shops and buy. So to answer your question, it is an emerging research area. A lot of people are doing. One of my students is now working on the supply chain logistics aspect of pre and post COVID, how it is affecting different products, how is it affecting different spatial locations. We are all learning. So it's the medical part of the COVID and everything else around it that I think all of our students and our researchers do want to understand, what they spend. And as Professor was saying, this unfortunately may not be the last pandemic that we are seeing in our lifetime. It may not be. We may have epidemics when we are then isolated, because now we feel very democratic and the world is one citizenship. But when it becomes an Africa problem, the world ignores us. So I think whatever learnings we have, the more and faster the learnings we have, the more we have an archive of information to refer back for future studies. I think we'll stop the question answers now. And yeah. There is a question for Camilla, but I'm not sure whether Camilla wants to take it. It says, what are the measures taken in Brazil and globally to support parent STEM in COVID? I think the answer should be read her publications.
Yes, I think we do ask for specific calls to mitigate these discrepancies, but the main issues are the cut of scholarships. So people that had delays in the Viva sessions, they have been postponed without the keeping of the payment. So what we do need is like extra fellowships, and then to actually fill in this gap that this year left. And the other situations will be really much around childcare or like childcare provisions, because the schools are not back yet, but people are back at office. So like that's an incongruency that we cannot solve at the moment.
I think we have to stop now because there are lots of questions with respect to vaccine, with respect to Chinese Academy of Sciences, with respect to parents in science, with respect to the new philosopher, Professor Sonali Das, so that we have to stop now. We have to stop now because it's beginning of weekend for several people, and here in Cairo it's 6 p.m. I thank you all, and Professor Lee almost sleepy because it's almost 11:30. Dr. Salman, he must leave home, and you, it's a new day, and Dr. Sonali, like us, 6 p.m. So that I have to thank all of you for these nice lectures, and we can repeat it if you want, but after vaccine. Okay, Dr. Ahmed, after vaccine, we can make another session about the new perspectives on the new age after COVID-19, maybe in new pandemic. Okay. Finally, I would like to thank esteemed guests for their fantastic, valuable contribution and all attendees for their participation. And I wish you all good luck, nice weekend, and to meet you again in other events. Thanks a lot. Bye.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Stay
Bye.
with us for pictures. The speakers only stay with us or speak. Okay, nice picture. Nice talks, nice picture, nice weekend for you, all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Everybody, stay safe.
Dr. Lee, Dr. Camila, bye-bye. Stay safe.
Bye.
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 Nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Bye-bye.